The power went out at 0200. The ICU plunged into darkness. Backup generators whining to life 3 seconds too late. Monitors screamed. Ventilators stuttered. In the chaos, no one noticed the woman in scrubs standing perfectly still by the nurse's station, her hand already reaching for the emergency oxygen kit. Her name was Hayes, night shift ICU nurse. 12 weeks on the ward, quiet, forgettable, the kind of person you walked past without looking twice. Then the encrypted radio on her belt crackled a frequency no civilian should have, and a voice cut through the static. Angel 6, we have a situation. How copy? Hayes closed her eyes. Exhaled slowly. They'd found her. Hayes had been working night shift at St. Mercy Regional for 3 months, and no one knew her first name. She clocked in at 1900 every evening, took report from the day nurse, and moved through her 12-hour shift like a machine. The ICU was a 20-bed unit on the 4th floor, half medical, half surgical, all critical. Ventilators hissed. 4 pumps beeped. Monitors tracked every heartbeat, every breath, every fluctuation in blood pressure. It was a place where seconds mattered and mistakes killed. Hayes never made mistakes. She was in her early 30s. Average height, dark hair pulled back in a tight bun. She wore the same navy scrubs every shift. No jewelry, no name badge with cute pins or inspirational quotes. Just her last name printed in block letters. Hayes. Her face was calm, unremarkable. She didn't smile. She didn't small talk. She moved through the unit with quiet efficiency, checking vitals, adjusting drips, documenting everything in neat, precise handwriting. The other nurses thought she was strange, distant, maybe a little cold. She's like a robot, one of them said during a break. I've never seen her eat. Never seen her sit down. She just works. Maybe she's just focused. Another replied. Or maybe she's got no personality. They didn't say it to her face. Hayes didn't care either way. She wasn't there to make friends. She was there to disappear. St. Mercy Regional was a mid-sized trauma center in rural Pennsylvania, servicing a 50-mile radius of farmland, small towns, and highway accidents. It wasn't prestigious. It wasn't cutting edge. But it was busy enough that one more nurse blended into the background without raising questions. That's what Hayes needed. Anonymity, routine, a place where her past couldn't find her. She'd chosen the night shift deliberately. Fewer staff, less supervision, fewer chances for someone to dig too deep or ask too many questions. The night shift nurses were a tight-knit group. They'd worked together for years, had their rhythms, their inside jokes, their unspoken hierarchies. Hayes wasn't part of that. She didn't try to be. When she'd first started, the charge nurse, a woman named Donna, 50-something with reading glasses on a chain and a no-nonsense attitude, had tried to welcome her. We usually do a potluck on Fridays. You should bring something. Hayes had nodded. I'll think about it. She never brought anything. After a few weeks, Donna stopped asking. The work itself was second nature to Hayes. She'd been trained in combat medicine, battlefield triage, trauma, stabilization, emergency procedures under fire. An ICU was calmer by comparison, but the principles were the same. Assess, prioritize, act. She could read a monitor at a glance, identify deteriorating vitals before the alarms even sounded, anticipate complications before they became crises. But she was careful not to show too much competence. She didn't volunteer for the hardest cases. She didn't correct the doctors when they made questionable calls. She kept her head down and her skills just visible enough to be useful, but not so visible that anyone wondered where she'd learned them. The night she coded the patient in bed 12, everything started to unravel. It was 0300. The unit was quiet except for the rhythmic beeping of monitors and the low hum of the ventilators. Hayes was at the nurse's station, reviewing labs on her assigned patients. Bed 12 was a 62-year-old man named Gerald Hoffman, post-op day 3 from a triple bypass. His vitals had been stable all night. Sinus rhythm. Blood pressure. Holding. No red flags. Then the alarm went off. Hayes's eyes snapped to the monitor. Ventricular fibrillation. The heart's electrical system had gone haywire, producing a chaotic, useless rhythm that couldn't pump blood. He had maybe 90 seconds before brain damage started. Less if they were unlucky. Hayes moved immediately. No hesitation. No panic. She grabbed the crash cart from the corner, keyed the intercom for a code blue, and was at the bedside in seconds. Hoffman was unresponsive, pulseless, his skin already turning gray. Hayes locked her hands over his sternum and started compressions. Her body weight driving down in steady, rhythmic thrusts. 1, 2, 4. She counted silently, her breathing controlled, her focus absolute. 30 compressions. She tilted his head back, checked his airway, delivered 2 rescue breaths. Then back to compressions. The code team arrived 30 seconds later. 2 nurses, a respiratory therapist, and Dr. Brennan, the attending physician. Brennan was in his 40s, competent but not exceptional, the kind of doctor who followed protocols, but didn't think beyond them. He took one look at the monitor and barked, "V-fib. Charge the defibrillator to 200. Hayes had already charged it. She stepped back, hands clear, and said calmly, "Clear." Brennan pressed the paddles to Hoffman's chest and delivered the shock. The patient's body jerked. The monitor flatlined for a moment, then showed the same chaotic rhythm. "Still V-fib. Again," Brennan said. "Charge to 300. Hayes adjusted the setting. "Clear. Another shock, another jerk." The monitor showed asystole flatline. "No electrical activity at all. EPI, 1 milligram, Brennan said, his voice rising slightly. Hayes had already drawn it. She handed him the syringe without a word. He pushed it into the 4-line, flushed it with saline. "Resume compressions," he said. Hayes was already doing them. Her hands locked back over Hoffman's chest, her arms straight, her weight driving down. She didn't look tired. Didn't look strained. She just kept going, mechanical and relentless. 2 minutes passed. Brennan called for another round of PP. Hayes delivered it. Another shock. Another round of compressions. The respiratory therapist intubated Hoffman, securing his airway, bagging oxygen into his lungs. Then a blip on the monitor, a single weak beat. Then another, sinus tachycardia. Fast but regular. Hoffman had a pulse. Brennan exhaled sharply, his hands shaking. Okay, good. Let's get him stabilized. Start a dopamine drip. Get another set of labs. I want a 12-lead EKG and a chest X-ray stat." Hayes was already adjusting the 4-pump, setting the drip rate, recalculating the dosage based on Hoffman's weight. She worked in silence, her movements smooth and automatic, no wasted motion, no second guessing. Within 3 minutes, Hoffman was stabilized, blood pressure rising, oxygen saturation climbing, heart rhythm holding steady. Brennan watched her for a moment, his frown deepening. "You're good at this." Hayes didn't look up from the monitor. "It's my job. No, I mean you're really good. Where'd you train?" "Seattle," Hayes said. It was a lie. She'd trained in a lot of places. Kandahar, Ramadi. A dozen forward operating bases were the nearest. Hospital was a helicopter ride away, and every decision was life or death. Brennan nodded slowly, still watching her. "You've done this before." "A lot." Hayes didn't respond. She finished adjusting the ventilator settings, documented the code in Hoffman's chart, and handed the clipboard to the unit clerk. "Good work," Brennan said. Hayes walked away without acknowledging him. Later in the break room, she sat alone in the dark, staring at the wall. Her hands were steady. Her breathing was controlled. But inside, she felt the familiar weight pressing down, the weight of pretending to be someone she wasn't. She'd left her old life 2 years ago. She'd walked away from the call sign, The missions, the gunfire and blood, and impossible choices. She'd gone to nursing school, passed her boards, and found a job where no one asked questions. She thought she could bury the past. Thought she could be normal, but normal people didn't move like she did. Normal people hesitated. Normal people second-guessed themselves. Normal people made mistakes. Hayes didn't, and people were starting to notice. Donna found her in the break room an hour later. "You okay?" Hayes looked up. "Fine, that was a good save. Hoffman's stable now. His wife's on her way in." Hayes nodded. Donna hesitated, then sat down across from her. "You've been here 3 months. You're a good nurse, really good. But you don't talk to anyone. You don't take breaks. You don't connect." Hayes didn't respond. "I'm not trying to pry," Donna continued. "I just want to make sure you're okay. This job can be heavy. It helps to have people." "I'm fine," Hayes said quietly. "I just prefer to work." Donna studied her for a moment, then nodded. "All right. But if you ever need anything, someone to talk to, a shift swap, whatever, just ask." "Thanks," Hayes said. Donna left. Hayes sat in the dark for another 10 minutes, then stood, clocked out, and walked to her car. She drove home to a studio apartment with no pictures on the walls, no personal belongings, nothing that couldn't fit in a single duffel bag. She'd learned a long time ago not to get attached to places or people. Because eventually, the past always caught up. The radio was hidden in the bottom of her locker, wrapped in a towel, tucked beneath her street clothes. Hayes hadn't turned it on in 18 months. She'd told herself she didn't need it anymore. That part of her life was over. Hayes was restocking the med room, counting narcotics per protocol, logging each vial in the controlled substance ledger. The work was tedious, methodical, exactly the kind of task that kept her mind occupied and her hands busy. Then she heard it, a faint crackle, a burst of static. Hayes froze. She set down the vial of morphine and listened. It came again, louder this time, filtering through the wall from the direction of the locker room. She glanced down the hallway. Empty. The other night nurse was in a patient room. The unit clerk was at the desk, headphones in, watching something on her phone. Hayes walked quickly to the locker area, pushed open the door, and closed it behind her. Intermittently, she opened her locker and pulled out the radio. It was a small, ruggedized unit, military-grade, encrypted, designed to operate on frequencies that didn't officially exist. The LED was blinking green. Incoming transmission. Stared at it for a long moment. She should have ignored it. Should have shut it off, thrown it in the trash, and walked away. Instead, she pressed the receive button. A voice came through, calm, professional male. A voice she recognized. "Angel 6, this is Overwatch. How copy?" Hayes's jaw tightened. Angel 6. She hadn't heard that callsign in 2 years. It belonged to someone she used to be. Someone she'd worked very hard to bury. Angel 6, how copy? This frequency is dead. Don't call again. Negative Angel 6, we have a situation. High-value target inbound to your location. Federal protective custody. We need you to secure the ICU and maintain cover until backup arrives. "I'm not operational," Hayes said. "You're the only asset we have in position. Find someone else." There was a pause. Deliberate. The target is a whistleblower. He exposed a human trafficking network operating out of Eastern Europe and Central Asia. 17 confirmed victims. Recovered so far. Dozens more still missing. His testimony is critical. If he dies, the case dies with him, and those people stay buried. Something she couldn't ignore. She'd spent 2 years trying to convince herself that she was done with this life. That she'd paid her dues, served her time, earned the right to walk away. But deep down, she knew the truth. People like her didn't get to walk away. Not really. When? She asked. Double 0-6-100. 2 hours, he'll be transferred under alias. Gunshot wound to the abdomen, critical but stable. 2 U.S. Marshals. Will be posted outside his room, standard protective protocol. You'll be assigned to his care, and the threat? Unknown. But credible. We intercepted chatter 48 hours ago from a known trafficking enforcement cell. They know he's being moved. They know he's vulnerable. And they're willing to spend resources to silence him. Hayes was silent for a moment, her thumb hovering over the transmit button. I left this behind. I'm not that person anymore, I know, the voice said. But right now, those people in your ICU need that person. Whether you like it or Not. Hayes didn't respond. She just turned off the radio and shoved it back into her locker. She didn't sleep that night. She just sat in the break room, staring at the clock, watching the minutes tick away. Her mind was already working, mapping the ICU layout, identifying choke points, calculating response times, running through scenarios. By the time the sun started to rise, she'd planned for 17 different contingencies. At 0600, the call came through. Gunshot wound to the abdomen. Post-op day 2 from exploratory laparotomy. Stable but requires close monitoring. Donna assigned it to Hayes without hesitation. You're good with the critical ones. Take bed 8. Hayes nodded and prepped the room. She checked the monitor, tested the 4 pumps, laid out the necessary supplies. Then she waited. The ambulance arrived at 0612. 2 paramedics wheeled the gurney through the ICU doors, flanked by 2 U.S. Marshals. Both Marshals were armed, sidearms visible on their hips, radios clipped to their belts. They scanned the hallway with the practiced vigilance of people who expected trouble. The patient was unconscious, intubated, pale. Hayes helped transfer him from the gurney to the ICU bed, connected the monitor leads, adjusted the ventilator. Settings: his vitals were stable, heart rate in the 80s. Oxygen saturation at 96%. She reviewed the chart. The surgical notes were thorough. Gunshot wound had perforated the small intestine. Exploratory surgery had repaired the damage. No complications. Barring infection or unforeseen issues, he'd recover. But Hayes wasn't thinking about recovery. She was thinking about the Marshals. She stepped out of the room and walked past them, casual and unremarkable. She glanced at their gear as the older Marshal, gray at the temples, weathered face, had his hand resting near his holster, eyes sweeping the hallway in slow, methodical arcs. The younger one was scrolling through his phone, but his posture was alert, his awareness sharp. Hayes moved to the nurse's station and pulled up the patient's electronic chart. She scanned the transfer paperwork, authorization codes, signatures, chain of custody documentation. Everything looked legitimate, but something felt wrong. She couldn't place it yet. Just a flicker of instinct. A sense that something was off. Hayes walked back toward the room, moving slowly, observing. The older Marshal nodded at her as she passed. Professional, courteous. The younger one didn't look up from his phone. Hayes studied him for a moment. His uniform was correct. His badge looked legitimate. A Safariland Level 3 retention holster, standard law enforcement issue. But the retention strap was positioned for a left-handed draw. And the Marshal was standing with his right hand near the weapon. It was a small detail. Into the supply room, and pulled out her personal phone. One that routed through encrypted servers in 3 different countries, and typed a brief message. Possible compromise. Marshal posted outside bed 8. Right side. Verify credentials immediately. She sent it. Then she deleted the app from her phone and cleared the cache. 5 minutes later, her phone buzzed. A single word reply from an unknown number. Confirmed. Imposter. Stand by for instructions. Hayes set the phone down. At the ICU full of vulnerable critical patients who couldn't be moved, couldn't be evacuated, couldn't defend themselves, she tried to walk away from this life. Tried to be someone else. There was nowhere to run. The Infiltrator made his move at 0855. The night staff was tired, ready to leave. The day staff was still getting oriented, catching up on reports, reviewing charts. For 15 minutes, the unit existed in a state of controlled chaos, nurses handing off patients, doctors making rounds, families arriving for visits. It was the perfect window for an attack. Hayes had been watching the fake Marshal for hours. He'd barely moved, barely spoken, but his eyes kept flicking to the clock on the wall. He was waiting for something. At 0853, he stepped away from the door and walked toward the elevator. Stretched their legs. He stopped at the elevator, pressed the button, and waited. When the doors opened, he stepped inside and disappeared. Hayes stood. She walked quickly to bed 8 and slipped inside the room. Hayes said, her voice calm but direct, "Bathroom break. Maybe getting coffee." The Marshal checked his. Hayes moved to the window and looked down at the parking lot 4 stories below. A white panel van was idling near the emergency entrance. But her mind was already calculating. "We need to move the patient," Hayes said. The Marshal frowned. "What? Why?" "He's an infiltrator. And he's not working alone." The Marshal's hand went instinctively to his weapon. "How do you know that?" "Because I'm trained to know." Retrieved it from her locker after the confirmation message and keyed the mic. "Overwatch, this is Angel 6. We are compromised. Request immediate backup to my location." The response was immediate, crackling through the small speaker. "Backup is en route. ETA 20 minutes. Hold position. And protect the asset. 20 minutes. His face had gone pale, but his training was kicking in. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who's going to keep your witness alive." Hayes moved to the door and locked it from the inside. "Don't open this door for anyone except federal backup. I don't care what they say, what credentials they show. You stay in this room, you keep him alive, and you wait. Understand?" "What are you going to do?" The Marshal started to protest, but she closed the door before he could finish. She heard the lock click behind her. The unit was busy now. Day shift nurses arriving, night shift giving. Report, families trickling in. Hayes moved quickly through the chaos, her mind already running scenarios. What she almost certainly did, they'd move to isolate the ICU room at the end of the hallway and open the electrical panel, which powered the monitors, which ran the ventilators and life support equipment. Then she moved to the medication room and quietly pulled a few items. The lights went out. The ICU plunged into darkness. Emergency battery backups kicked in after 3 seconds, bathing everything in dim red emergency lighting. Monitors beeped frantically as they switched to battery power. Ventilators continued running, but the sudden darkness triggered alarms. Nurses called out to each other, confused, trying to restore order. Hayes stayed perfectly calm. She moved to the central nurses' station and reached under the desk, pulling the manual fire alarm lever. A piercing siren filled the building, and the automated PA system blared to life. "Attention. Fire alarm activated. Please proceed to the nearest exit in an orderly fashion. Do not use elevators." Controlled, predictable chaos. Exactly what Hayes needed. The infiltrator reappeared at the end of the hallway, moving fast, no longer pretending to be casual. Both carrying equipment bags that hung too heavy to contain medical supplies. Hayes stepped into the center of the hallway. Hayes didn't move. Her voice was calm, almost conversational. "You're not getting into that room." The infiltrator's eyes narrowed. "Lady, I don't know who you think you are, but you need to step aside before you get hurt. And you're not getting past me." The infiltrator hesitated. Something in her voice, something cold and certain, made him pause. He'd heard that tone before, from operators. From people who'd killed and didn't flinch. "Last chance," he said. Hayes didn't blink. "Same to you." The infiltrator's finger tightened on the trigger. Hayes moved. Hayes closed the distance in 3 steps, faster than the infiltrator expected. She grabbed his wrist with her left hand, twisting it sharply inward while driving her right palm into his elbow. The joint hyperextended with a sickening crack. His finger reflexively pulled the trigger, but the barrel was already pointed at the ceiling. The suppressed round punched harmlessly into the acoustic tile above. The pistol clattered to the floor. Before he could react, she pressed her forearm across his throat, cutting off his air supply. He struggled, clawing at her arm, but she applied precise pressure to the carotid arteries. Hayes released the unconscious infiltrator and rolled left, grabbing his fallen pistol as she moved. Shattering a monitor, splintering the edge of the nurse's station. Hayes came up behind a medication cart, staying low. 3 from the right. They were using extended magazines, probably 30 rounds each. They had ammunition to waste. She didn't. She keyed the hospital PIA system one more time, her voice calm and clear. Code Silver. 4th floor ICU, Code Silver. This is not a drill. Code Silver, active shooter. It would trigger an immediate lockdown. Security would seal the stairwells, elevate the elevators, and call law enforcement. It wouldn't stop the shooters, but it would contain them and keep civilians out of the line of fire. The 2 gunmen advanced, moving tactically, covering each other's angles. They were trained, disciplined, not amateurs. Hayes moved low and fast, using the equipment and furniture as cover. She circled behind the central desk, flanking left. The nearest gunman was scanning the area where she'd been, not where she was. She fired once. The round hit him in the upper thigh, deliberate, disabling, not lethal. He dropped, cursing, clutching his leg. The second gunman spun toward her, finger tightening on the trigger. Hayes fired again. He stumbled backward, his weapon clattering to the floor. Hayes moved quickly, kicking both weapons out of reach. She checked their pulses, both alive, both immobilized. She used tourniquets from the crash cart to tie off the leg wound, preventing the first gunman from bleeding out, then zip-tied both men's wrists using 4 tubing. The first infiltrator was starting to regain consciousness. Hayes pressed her knee into his back, holding him down. "How many more?" she asked quietly. He spat at her. Hayes increased the pressure. Not enough to injure, but enough to make breathing difficult. "How many?" "3 of us," he gasped. "Just 3. Hayes didn't believe him. Infiltrators always lied. But she didn't have time to interrogate further. She moved back toward bed 8 and knocked on the door. The code she'd given the marshal before leaving. The door unlocked. The marshal stood behind it, weapon drawn, eyes wide. Jesus Christ. What the hell just happened out there? "They tried to breach. I stopped them." Hayes handed him the infiltrator's pistol. "Federal backup is still 15 minutes out. Keep this door locked. Don't open it for anyone except them. Not me, not hospital staff, not anyone, understand?" Hayes turned to leave. The marshal said, "What's your name? Your real name?" Hayes paused in the doorway. "It doesn't matter." She left the room, moving through the ICU to sweep for additional threats. The patients were terrified, some crying, some unconscious, oblivious to the chaos. The nurses were huddled in the break room, the door locked, waiting for the all-clear. Hayes moved through every room, every closet, every corner. She checked the stairwells, the supply rooms, the dark corners where someone could hide. She found the 4th man on the stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors, trying to escape. He saw her coming and raised his weapon, a compact submachine gun. Illegal, designed for close-quarters killing. Hayes didn't hesitate. She fired twice. Both rounds center mass. He dropped, the weapon clattering down the concrete steps. Hayes walked down, checked his pulse. Dead. She closed her eyes for a moment, steadying her breathing. She hadn't wanted this. Hadn't wanted to be this person again. But she hadn't had a choice. By the time federal agents stormed the building full tactical gear, Rifles raised, voices shouting commands. Hayes was back in the ICU, performing chest compressions on a coding patient in bed 14. An elderly woman, post-op from a bowel resection, whose heart had given out during the chaos. Hayes's hands were bloody. Her scrubs were torn at the shoulder where she'd rolled across broken glass. Her face was blank, focused entirely on the rhythm of compressions. The lead federal agent, a tall man in black, tactical gear with FBI stenciled across his chest, walked up to her, stared for a moment, and said one word. "Angel 6? Hayes didn't respond. She just kept doing compressions, counting silently in her head, maintaining the rhythm that kept blood flowing to the woman's brain. 30 compressions. 2 breaths, 30 compressions. 2 breaths, the monitor beeped. A rhythm returned. Sinus tachycardia. The woman had a pulse. Hayes stepped back, wiped her hands on a towel, and walked away without a word. The agent watched her go, then turned to his team. Secure the floor. Get statements from everyone. And find out who the hell that woman really is. But by the time they started looking, Hayes was already gone. The hospital was locked down for 8 hours. Federal agents swept every floor, interviewed every witness, photographed every piece of evidence. The 3 surviving infiltrators were taken into federal custody. The 4th was zipped into a body bag and removed through the service entrance. The whistleblower, whose real name was Alexei Petrov, a former logistics coordinator for an international trafficking syndicate, was transferred to a secure federal medical facility under armed guard. He would survive. He would testify. And because of that, dozens of victims would have a chance at justice. But Hayes didn't stay to see it. She sat in the employee locker room, alone, staring at the wall. The building was still crawling with federal agents, hospital administrators, and local police. They all wanted to talk to her, wanted answers, wanted to know who she was and how. She'd done what she'd done. Hayes had no intention of telling them. Dr. Brennan found her first. He knocked hesitantly on the doorframe. "Hayes?" She looked up, her face expressionless. "Administration wants to talk to you," he said. "So, does the FBI? They're saying you saved lives, multiple lives." She pulled out her bag, already packed like it always was, and slung it over her shoulder. "Where are you going?" Brennan asked. "I'm done here. What? You can't just leave. They need your statement. They'll manage." Hayes pulled off her ID badge and set it on the bench. "Tell administration I quit. Effective immediately." Brennan stared at her. "Hayes, you're a hero. You saved that man's life. You stopped an armed assault. I'm not a hero." Hayes said quietly, cutting him off. "I'm just someone who did what needed to be done. Then stay." "No, you don't." She walked past him, out of the locker room, down the back stairwell. She avoided the main corridors, the crowds, the cameras. The air was cool and clean. She got into her car, a nondescript sedan, paid for in cash, registered under a name that wasn't hers, and started the engine. She didn't look back. As she drove, her phone buzzed. A secure message from an unknown number. "Thank you. Angel 6. The asset is secure. Mission success. We'll be in touch." Has deleted the message. Then she pulled over, removed the SIM card from the phone, snapped it in half, and threw both pieces into a dumpster. She didn't want their thanks. Didn't want their missions. Didn't want to be Angel 6 ever again. She just wanted to disappear. 3 weeks later, a new night shift nurse started at a hospital in Denver. Her name was Miller. She was quiet, competent, and kept to herself. She worked the ICU, handled the critical cases, and never made mistakes. One of the other nurses mentioned her during a shift change. "She's good, really good. But she doesn't talk much, kind of strange. Maybe she just likes her privacy." Another nurse said. "Yeah, maybe." Miller, though that wasn't her real name, worked her 12-hour shift in silence. She checked vitals, adjusted medications, stabilized a patient who coded at 0400. When her shift ended, she clocked out, walked to her car, and drove to a small apartment with no pictures on the walls. She didn't own much. A bed, a table, a chair, clothes that fit in a single duffel bag. She'd learned a long time ago not to get attached to places or people. Somewhere, in a secure federal facility, an agent reviewed a classified file. The name at the top read, Hayes, Sarah J. Calcine, Angel 6. Status, inactive. The agent closed the file, locked it in a safe, and walked away. Some people didn't want recognition. Didn't want medals or commendations or parades. They just wanted to do the work, save the lives, and disappear into the next shift, the next city, the next quiet corner where no one knew their name. Hayes Sarah Hayes. Though almost no one knew that anymore was one of them. She'd been a lot of things. A soldier, an operator, a weapon, and now a nurse. But underneath it all, she was just someone trying to balance the scales. Trying to save enough lives to make up for the ones she'd taken. She didn't know if it would ever be enough, but she kept trying anyway, because that was all she had left.